Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web series Very Clever Primitives, taken from Reddit. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 16. My heart began to race as Agent Brown talked with the two security personnel, armed to the teeth. My thoughts wandered, and my gaze moved upward into the crystal blue sky. I could see the massive station that housed my people's leaders up there. It made me think about how all this began. How one silly expedition to a backwater solar system with the most hostile planets imaginable led to the discovery of another sapient species. This little, insignificant blue dot, amongst countless others, housed one of the most impressive species that I ever come to know. They were impressive, yet horrifying. They were primitive, yet infinitely intelligent. How could our two species coexist? It was up to me to decide. I gave a faint laugh under my breath. All of this happened because I decided to take a sample of a human tissue so that our species could make contact with them. Rather, when humanity decided to throw all caution to the wind and pound on our ship, they were just as eager to meet us as we were to meet them. My eyes shut tightly at the thought. By all accounts, from what I've seen, been told, have experienced, our species was better off without humanity. They were a barbaric kind, letting their emotions control their actions. They mistrusted each other out of pure instinct. Yet here I was, sitting in a human land shuttle, as we made our way closer and closer to our destination. My eyes slowly opened. The building, as we approached, was massive in scale. It soared high into the heaven, the stone shimmering, beautiful, white-fringed with beautiful gold. It was heavenly to look at. Humans crowded the front entrance, each of them holding very, very primitive recording equipment. My eyes went wide, however, as I saw who they were talking to. These human recorders. They were speaking with and recording Villan officials. Judging from the yellow color of their robes, they were all diplomatic caste. Of course, they were diplomats. A diplomat should have been in my position. Politics and interspecies communications were no place for a scholar. My hands fell against the window on my side of the land shuttle as we moved ever onward on that pristine black road towards the back of the building. More and more security personnel, looking more like armed soldiers than uniformed guards of the hospital, patrolled the area, keeping out the human civilians with relative ease. So humans could be competent when it mattered. I began to put two and two together. The humans recording my people were likely the informants of their species, informing the human population of what was going on today. The thought made me even more nervous. Not only were my people waiting on bated breath for a true, unbiased opinion on humanity, but many humans questioned their fate. They questioned what I would say. They questioned if this place would be their eternal home until they figured out how to leave. It was difficult to say how quickly they would discover it. How kind cooperated, and, using our combined intellect and drive, we were able to discover spaceflight and survivability in the cold darkness of the cosmos very quickly. Humans stood to surpass us just as quickly. I only questioned what it would take to drive humans to put aside their territories, borders, and even flags to work together as a species, rather than as countrymen, to achieve a common goal. I had full faith that they could do it, but I wasn't sure how long it would take, nor what it would take to get them to do it. I racked my brain, destroyed my composure. I must have looked like an exhausted mess. I went several days without sleep, barely any food, and using human restrooms was less than dignifying. Did they truly stand up to urinate and separate males from females into their own separate rooms? Well, I suppose for health purposes they may have had a point, but it would make more sense to... I rolled my eyes. Humans didn't trust each other, even the opposite sex. The survival instincts was going to drive me absolutely mad by the time I arrived back on my home ship. I would need to go to sleep for several rotations in order to regain my niche shred of composure I had lost in this god-forsaken planet. Agent Brown arrived towards the back of the building. Several of the human press, as I heard Agent Brown mutter, began to swarm the security barricade. Flashes of cameras, screaming, risen microphones all entered my peripheral vision as I was escorted out of the car by 3 large, intimidating human males, nearly my height and twice as wide. They could each squeeze my head between their hands and leave it nothing but pulp between their fingers. The mental image was, less than settling. Between the intimidating human security personnel and the screams of the human press, I was eager to be rushed into the large building and have those doors slammed shut. My scales must have been as green as the large plants that rose towards the heavens of this planet. Agent Brown placed a hand on my shoulder, looking up with that neutral expression, yet I could see in his eyes that he was truly concerned. Whether that concern was about me or the fate of his species, I was uncertain, and I did not care. He nodded forward, urging me to follow him in silence as we wandered down the expansive, glimmering, pristine hallways of a building designed for leaders and greatness. It seemed to be a universal truth that leaders of every species wanted the best, freshest, and most exuberant housing, no matter where they went. Humans had enormous, well-crafted, beautiful buildings. My kind had planet-sized spacefaring space stations. It would appear that even species as different as humans and Valan had similar tastes. My train of thought was derailed as I heard a quite familiar shrill. My scales turned a deep, dark, soul-crushed black as I heard that shrill, that squeal, that cheerful skip with every click of a step. My eyes went wide. No! Not now! Not here! I slowly turned and saw it approach, her claws tapping against the beautiful stone floors, her gaudy colors shining a brilliant golden yellow that nearly matched her official diplomat robes. Those gaudy colors, that vile tone of voice, I knew that female. And as she nearly skipped over to me, Agent Brown looked towards her as well, then back at me, and must have seen the hate in my eyes. No, I've never been an intimidating fellow. I've never seen someone like Agent Brown show anything but the slightest fraction of emotion. However, when someone as good at reading people's thoughts as Agent Brown slowly began to back away, he must have heard the wails of the rotting dam swirl around my frame. My eyes burned with the hot, fetid rot of 1,000 carcasses. My blood boiled like volcanic magmas. My quills stood on end, and every exhale left wisps of almost tangible smoke around my body. Needless to say, those black dismal scales swirled with molten red. It was a universal sign for every Valan to ever exist, to stay away. But to Skya, whose very mind was filled with starshine and sweets, all she saw was a fellow ship-dweller. "Greetings, Skalan," she chirped, her voice claws and glass to my ears. I hissed at the female. I actually hissed at a fellow ship-dweller. She managed to catch that message fairly quickly, her scales immediately shifting to a shocked blue from that vibrant gold that they had been earlier. Oh heavens, Skalan, you look awful," she muttered softly, expressing genuine concern. I trembled in fury. I wanted her gone. I wanted her to leave. The only thing letting me tolerate her presence for even this long was the fact that she was Valan, and I was desperate to speak to someone of my own species for once. "Really?" I asked, my voice dripping with disdain and followed by another hiss. "What gave you that idea, Diplomat Skya?" I asked, leaning forward, my eyes wide and frenzied. That stupid, oblivious wretch could not even see my utter hatred for her as she took a few steps forward. She reached towards my shoulders, and a very savage part of my mind told me to eat her. However, despite how much I felt that the humans, especially Agent Brown, wouldn't have even flinched at such a display of savagery, cannibalism was frowned upon in Valan culture. "Now, Skalan, I've been sent here to make sure that you are presentable for the human leaders. I must say, though, with your colors and your current complexion, you look fairly, tribe-willed," she muttered, tugging at my tunic and sniffing my uniform. "You could use some new clothing and some sanitation, too. Luckily, Ska'ana and her security team gave me permission to go through your quarters and find your—" "You went through my quarters? You went through my quarters to take my things?" I asked. The skies darkened, the earth shook, and human children screamed in terror as I prepared to unleash 1,000 woes upon this Valan diplomat. Skaya laughed nervously, despite not seeing the imagined devastation I was prepared to unleash upon this world. Her scales turned a bright green as she took a few steps back. Well, I was granted permission, and I guess it is required to— You, of all people, you went through my possessions. Do you realize how invasive that is? Do you? Do you? I trailed off as I imagined storms brewing showered lightning upon the world, instead of a storm of cosmic fire and brimstone. The only thing I unleashed was a sigh of disdain. My scales slowly fading into an annoyed orange, shouting that this gaudy ball of colorful annoyance would do nothing but make tensions worse. Instead, I shook my head. Just give me my damned robes so I can get this over with, I muttered, with disdain. Finally, for once in Skaya's miserable existence, she was able to take a damn hit. She nodded, staying silent, turning around and leading me through the extravagant corridors towards a room whose door was made of polished, slightly red wood. She opened the door to reveal a brightly lit room with many different trays of exotic foods and drinks on display, along with beautiful works of art all over the walls. This was no simple room. This was an extravagant penthouse. They were providing me with, at least for a short time, that I would be allowed some brief respite from my exhausting visit on Earth. Skaya closed the door behind her, her scales turning a mournful violet as the door clicked behind her. She sighed, looking towards me with sympathetic eyes. I know you hate me, Skalan, she muttered, rubbing her left arm as if she were wounded. But I had to be the one to see this. This is my job, Skalan. This is what I'm supposed to do. I don't mean to upset you. I really don't, but— Then stop talking to me, I hissed, blinking at my own reaction to the female. I sighed, my eyes closing, a twang of guilt striking my conscience as I slowly slid off my lab coat, letting it fall to the floor. Someone else could clean my mess. I was utterly exhausted and still had work to do. Apologies, it's been a rough time here on Earth. I do not hate you, Skaya. I find you incredibly annoying, but I do not hate you, I replied, a flash of yellow appearing on my scales as I approached a human sanitation station. They called it a shower. I moved towards the shower, closing the restroom door behind me, and, after some trial and error, figured out how to operate the strange decontamination chamber, and began to work at cleaning myself off of the grime and stress of my duration on the human world. I cared not if Skaya was in the main room on the other side of the door while I bathed. It was her decision to escort me here. Likely, she was to see to me for the duration of my stay here, while Agent Brown prepared to escort me to the humans and Valan leaders. Would the High Command be here on Earth? It was unlikely. I didn't trouble myself with the thoughts of what was to come, however. I was more focused on, for once during my stay, having some peace and quiet. I could have sang. I was so relieved to have some fresh water wash over my exhausted form. What in the heavens was I going to say? Everything since I arrived here seems to be a blur now. Agent Brown seemingly vanished, leaving me in Skaya's care, of all people. Although I assumed that was likely the work of the Valan leadership after hearing of the rituals I'd gone through while here. Speaking of my diplomatic assistant, I heard a tapping on the wooden door through the roar of the rushing water falling upon me. I sighed, placing a hand on the beige tiles that adorned the very clean marble shower. Skalan, are you okay? That incessant, bright voice screeched through the wood door. I grumbled, rubbing my face. I had no more desire to play nice with this diplomat, yet I would remain cordial. I would remain friendly. I needed to. I couldn't allow emotions to write over my thoughts on humanity. I couldn't let them wrap my irritation, my exhaustion, and my desire to just go home skew my opinions. Skaya was a good test of my resolve, I supposed. I'm fine, yeah, I called out, cutting my cleansing short and turning off the water, stepping out to dry myself off with one of the very, very soft towels they had provided. Humans had a way with luxury. I began to get dressed into my official scholar-cast robes, keeping the soft, damp towel hung on the convenient rack as I walked out. The coolness of the room refreshing on my cleansed form. Remember, it's diplomatic Skaya outside of this room, she insisted. causing me to roll my eyes in disdain as I moved over towards my coat, grabbing any bits and pieces of technology I may have overlooked and stuffing them into my robe pockets. Humans could not touch our technology. Not yet, at least. Not until I've said my piece. Not until the Valan leaders decided what to do about this primitive species. I would not allow an oversight on my part to ruin all of this. I would not allow my exhaustion to mean nothing. "What are you doing, Scalan? You're acting quite paranoid," Yar commented, taking a few tentative steps towards me as she watched me double, triple-check my lab coat and discarded clothing for anything I may have missed. The phylactery, the communicator, and a few other technological odds and ends I bring with me no matter where I go. I gave a faint laugh, shaking my head. "Humanity seems to be rubbing off on me," I replied, standing up, stretching, and giving a faint yawn as I turned to look at my dreaded shipmate. "Life wasn't soft tells and amazing food for me while I was here, yeah." "I know," she nodded, her scales shining a brilliant, if gaudy violet. "That's why the High Command got involved. Everyone on the ship got to hear of your trials under the human general's care. I was quite worried about you. Scar-Resh was throwing fits about it. We were forced to detain her," she muttered, causing my scales to shimmer orange in irritation once more. "Detain? What did she do? It couldn't have been that drastic," I replied, laughing faintly. Skiyar shook her head, her scales dimming. Skiyar's scales never dimmed. She was a bright, bubbly, shining example of annoying glee. What could cause her scales to dim? What did Scar-Resh do? "Scar-Resh, once the general began to insinuate that he was going to take you aside and convince you of his ideologies, attempted to detonate the engine core of the shuttle that you and the warriors took to the base. She was going to kill them for trying to, you know," she muttered, rubbing her arm once again. "We all knew how emotionally charged she was, and that once she left. After all, you were the one who gave her those eyes of hers," she said softly. "So it was only natural that she would overreact, considering how dire the circumstances were. She is to be detained until you return." Skiyar nodded, my own scales turning blue in shock. "Detonate the engine core? Has she gone mad?" I proclaimed, running a hand through my quills as I shook my head in disbelief. "And I didn't give her those eyes, I simply helped design them. Regardless, that is not how a scholar is supposed to react when tragedy strikes. What is she going to do if a plague hits a colony world and she starts to fix it? Blow it up?" I exclaimed, my scales turning orange once more. "Oh, Skiyar, you were a fantastic diplomat. This was the last thing I needed to hear in this present moment." "Lan," she began, immediately drawing my attention with addressing me with my informal name. "Scar-Resh had no clutch mother. Scar-Resh's entire clutch was destroyed in an earthquake on her home world. Like it or not, you are the only parental figure in her life. Don't think that none of us notice how you two operate. You may not notice, but we diplomats do. She is a pupil to you, but to her, you are a clutch father. If you look at humanity as cold and calculating as you look at someone who clearly sees you as a parent, I fear for the future of our relations to humanity," she chastised, causing me to take a step back. "None of us questioned why she attempted to do what she did. She was in such an emotional distress that she had no true primary color. She was maddened at the thought of losing her only parent. You know as well as I do that she's going to be a great scholar of biology if she can survive you. If she can be emotionally attached to you, Scalan." Her eyes narrowed, and I saw, for the first time, angry red on the bubbly diplomat's scales. "How can anyone be atrociously attached to you is absurd. You have no personality. You are your work. Everything is about your work. Scar-Resh is a pupil that you are culturally bound to teach. But other than that, did you even think about her once during your discussion with the General? Did you think about how the future with humanity might influence some of our nymphs like Scar-Resh? Have you ever once considered that a new species' thoughts, opinions, and cultures might make our newest generations far better and more powerful than any other Valan before them?" she asked, pressing claw into my chest, demanding my answer. I had none. I had never once considered what humanity would mean to our people. I had only thought of how humanity would lie, cheat, and steal our technology for their own personal gain. I never once thought, "Remember, Lan," she spoke softly, her scales beginning to glow a soft yellow. "They knocked on our door first." Speaking of doors, the door to my room opened and Agent Brown appeared, looking at us both, giving a sigh of fear. Hey, Scalon, it's, time. End of chapter. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I'd just like to thank the T5 members and Patreons. Alithia, Barkey, Feudikiol, Meridian 117, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Albard and Guster, Lord Ashrakull, and White Van 420.